Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
What if, after 24 years in the military service, your deceased grandmother came to you and said, "You're missing your calling. You're a medium. Get to work." Well, it happened to Dean McMURRAY. Stay tuned for Dean's story. Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to share his story is Dean McMURRAY, the military medium. Dean is an internationally acclaimed psychic medium, healer, dowser, and ordained minister. After 24 years of service, he retired from the Army and enlisted in a new service. He devoted his life to developing his psychic abilities in service to others. Today, Dean conducts readings for clients throughout the world, teaches mediumship classes, presents at regional symposiums, conferences, and workshops. His website, themilitarymedium.com. Dean, thank you for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Thanks so much, Gwilda, for having me on today. It's a pleasure.
It really is. This is such a fun topic. So let's start out with what you do in the military. What was your job, so to speak?
For almost 15 years, Gwilda, I was in combat arms, and what that means is I was in the infantry. And then about 6 of those years, I was also a paratrooper. And then other various continuing years, I was like in administration and other various combat support roles.
Okay, so you started out on the ground and ended up taking care of the people that are on the ground.
That's what happens when you move up in management, yes. Put it in a corporate sense, yes.
So during your time in the military service, did you have any indication you were psychic?
Not that I was aware of. And I even went back into journals too, because, they always say hindsight's 20/20. And I went back, Gwilda, and looked at journals that I kept back in Afghanistan. And this was back in 2003 and everything else. And I had premonitions. I had a lot of things I look at now and knew that it was, a lot of psychic knowing or, claircognizance and different things. But I wasn't aware of it at the time. And I knew that there was something going on, but I didn't know what it was.
Did you find that, particularly when you were on the ground, that some of that claircognizance or knowing would dictate your stepping left instead of right sort of thing?
Absolutely. For example, one of the, back in 2003, we were in a night convoy, and there was a out-of-body voice that told me to move our up-armored vehicles another 500 meters, and because all of a sudden they had stopped unexpectedly, and I couldn't get anybody in the lead vehicle on the radio, and I thought it was very weird, and this voice out of nowhere, seemingly nowhere, kept on urgently asking me or telling me to move the vehicles up another 500 meters. And so what I ended up doing was getting out of the vehicle and sprinting forward and finding out that everybody, which was so odd, decided to take a bathroom break in the middle of a patrol at night in Afghanistan. Right, literally. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And about the time that we were having this discussion about, why they lost their minds, we heard a audible clicking noise, and what we still believe today was a command detonated IED trying to be detonated. And we were carrying technology at the time that was very rudimentary and was being tested and created electronic bubble around the vehicles that prevented electronic type detonators to go off. And
Wow.
We believe because the technology prevented the IED from going off that I'm here with you today. However, the other aspect, I go back to the voice and go, I can explain the technology, but where did the voice come from? Who was that?
Right.
And And I kind of like, and if you've ever been around military machinery, it's not quiet unless it's designed to be quiet. And this certainly was not, an up armor Humvees and, and I even asked my driver, did you hear that? And he goes, what do you mean? And I was like, never mind. I didn't. So, because at that time, I was just listening to it and I didn't know how to explain it. So there
Yeah.
was some interesting phenomena, to say the least.
Do you feel that that sort of thing happens more when a person is in life or death situations or under stress, under duress?
Yes and no. I feel that if we're listening all the time, that there are messages or, the energy or, again, voices from the eternal that is guiding us, that helps us like, hey, don't do this, it's dangerous, or that's not for your highest good if you go over here, so if we're listening to the energy, if we're listening to whatever label you want to use, whether it's spirit, the energy, whatever, universe, God, it'll guide us to, where we need to be.
When we need to be doing
When
what
we
we need to
need
be
to be.
doing.
When,
Yeah.
yeah, not
Yeah.
get caught with their pants down, right? So literally.
Exactly. So, had you been close to the grandmother that came to you from the dead?
I did, and that was my paternal grandmother, my mom's mom, and she actually I spent a lot of time with her growing up, and kind of when I was in kindergarten and things like that, where her and my grandfather would watch me quite often when I was young, and so that's why I believe the universe kind of used, in a sense, my grandmother, because I had that eternal bond, and it was really quite earth-shattering for me because here this lady that I, love more than anything, passed away when I was about 13. And then all of a sudden she comes to visit me when I'm in my early 30s. And then what the heck's going on? Like, how can you be here? And it was one of those complete mind melt moments, like, how does this work?
How did she present to you, Dean?
You know, First and foremost, Wilda, it was more of a knowing, that claircognizance of the aspect of every sense of my being knew that it was my grandmother. And if you just think about when you're around your own mother or, people that you love, that dispersion of energy and matter of where our bodies pick up on that sense of, hey, I know it's you. And secondly, then, it was the face that I always remembered, in pictures and just
So
how
you
I remember
you were
her.
able to see her as well. There was a visual.
Absolutely. A little bit later into the experience that evening, but absolutely.
So,
So,
like you saw her in the room or in your mind's eye?
in mind's eye.
Okay. Right.
So, yeah, so it was, and it was more comforting, but yet it was off-putting because, it's like, okay, yes, it's grandma, but oh, you passed back in the 80s. How are you here now? And trying to wrestle with that. And, and I'm literally talking out loud to myself and saying, how do I know it's grandma? And answering myself going, I don't know, but she's not here to hurt us. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to be in a padded room somewhere,
Exactly.
and, so, the thing is that it really took me out of the frying pan into the fire, so to speak. And that I always call that my come to Jesus moment or my spiritual awakening. And, I'm stubborn by nature. I think if you ask my wife, she'd agree with you. But it was something that I needed to be so pivotal because at that point, as you shared in my bio, I ended up retiring at 24 years with the military, and it I don't want to say got in a rut, but in a sense, if you would have asked me 13 years ago now, who am I, my first words would have been, I'm a soldier. And because that's how I identified, and then all the other labels would come as a dad and as a husband and et cetera, et cetera. And I needed something to go, gosh, I don't even know who I am anymore, because, you know, here the soldier part is ending, and, you know, but what about this mediumship thing? And what does that mean? And that's really, Wilda's, where I went on a journey of trying to figure out what being a medium looked like for Dean McMurray. And quite honestly, you know, in the start and the end of the day, I always consider myself a small town kid from northern Minnesota, and has roots, by the way, in Canada. And, you know, I never considered myself extra special. I didn't go looking for mediumship. I didn't see a novelty shirt and buy it off the rack saying, "Hey, I'm a medium." So it was just something that, you kind of, I stepped into it, and very hesitantly embraced it. And I actually tried to ignore it. And
good luck with that, right?
Right. Oh man, did that ever not work? It got louder. It's like, can you hear me now? Like the commercials.
Yeah.
And
well,
go
Dean,
ahead.
we're about out of time in this segment.
Yes.
We have to pause for a station identifier. Dean and I will return very shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. How can you tell if you're a psychic medium or just hearing voices? With us this hour discussing mediumship is Dean McMURRAY. His website, themilitarymedium.com. Dean, we were talking about, your experience of recognizing that you had access to information from elsewhere. Is there any other gifted people in your family that you know of, any people that are mediums?
Yeah, for sure. It's really interesting when I kind of came out the quote unquote metaphysical closet, to my immediate family, or, to my family. I found out that my sister is very much clairaudient. My mother is extremely intuitive. And my other sister is extremely intuitive as well. And now I don't know about my brother. Haven't figured that one out, but so the jury's still out. But I wouldn't underestimate that. Maybe he's just keeping a low key and not divulging that he is, which is fine. And the other thing which is interesting is my dad, before he passed, actually was talking with one of my aunts in Canada, up in Calgary, and he had been mentioning that that I was a medium at the time and everything, and she said, "Oh, don't you remember Aunt so and so?" And this is back many years back, in probably in the Cardston area and of Alberta and everything. And it was kind of interesting, as I understand it, that she used to do like tea leaf readings and different. You think of them, I guess they'd be summarized more as parlor readings, maybe, as a older term. So I thought was very interesting, because I was like, when you make it okay to be a certain way, and other people kind of open up about, "Oh, don't you remember so and so? They used to do readings." And it's like, what? Where is this? What planet am I on? Because
Yeah.
it's like all of a sudden, and I think, and I'm sure you found this too, Wilda, in your travels, is that so many people are afraid to come out and express or share that they have gifts, because and it still happens today, that there are people that get institutionalized
Exactly.
or get put on medications or different things, because they believe that. And I'm certainly not a doctor or a psychologist, but because they believe they're having a psychosis episode or
Right. And
something, or it's
that
fear.
that leads us to the next question: is how long did it take you to decide that you were actually talking to someone on the other side rather than hearing voices?
Right. Well, every day sometimes it's a struggle. Am I going crazy, or do I actually have a gift? Right. I think it was pretty quick because in the beginning, obviously, when my grandmother showed up, it seemed like it all happened so quickly. And in all in the middle of all this journey, I'll call it, there was a local psychic that was kind of in the middle of it. And she was the only one that I knew that did all things spiritual. And so I was jokingly referring to her at the time as the voodoo chick. And because that was my language back then. If I didn't understand it, I would make fun of it. So, before I kind of embraced mediumship, I was like, I reached out to her and I said, we need to figure out what the bleep bleep is going on with this. And she said, Dean, you're a medium. And I said, you are full of you know what. And she said, you're probably right, but that doesn't make you any less a medium. And she said, let's try something. And when I first realized that there was something more to this, I don't think I was really a believer. I'm very much still a skeptic. And I think a bit of that is healthy. And so she actually wrote down some names on a piece of paper. And she said, I don't want you to feel any pressure, but she said, I want you to focus on my paper and just tell me what you get. And it was, if you think of a dark, dark room and a bunch of floating heads, we'll call them, just kind of came into view. And then all of a sudden, one was of an older lady. And I described the age. I described exactly what she looked like and what I understand her to look like. And then exactly what she showed me. And it was, I still remember it, that she was showing me this, it looked like a big stainless steel bathtub with absolutely gorgeous welds. And I'm not even a welder, but I was just in love with this thing. And so after we got done, I thought I was off my rocker. I was like, and she said, no, that was really good. That lady you described perfectly is my husband's mom. She recently passed, and she said, you don't know this, but she goes, my husband's family every year collects and renders down maple syrup, and they have for years. And she said they just this year purchased a new vat for rendering down. And she said, what you were being shown was one of those vats, and they look like big stainless steel bathtubs where they pour all the maple syrup and they boil it. And she said, you're right. The welds on it is that, they do it by machine, and it's absolutely beautiful and it's polished. And yeah, she said and she said, so, there's validation for you, Dean. And I was like, it's not a bunch of, and yeah. I was like, and a lot of times I catch myself not being in awe of myself, but being in awe of the messages that come through going, you can't make this crap up. Like, even if I wanted to try, and I caught myself saying, like, you could never make that up in a million years of the evidential information at times that comes through. And it's just like, leaves me speechless. I'm like, whoa, that is the coolest thing, and
so Dean, so you ascertained,
yeah,
okay, I guess I have to own this, I'm a psychic medium,
right?
So, but that's a raw talent, right?
Right.
And it's quite the terrain to surf, even with talent.
Absolutely.
To know what you're seeing, to know what you're hearing, to know what's right to share and what's not. Did you get training? Where'd you start to hone your skills?
Yeah, it's a great question. Early on, when I started, shortly after I embraced who I was as a medium, it was suggested that I take a class or two. And there was a local medium that was doing a course in mediumship. And they were like, you really should connect with him. And I did that. And, after the course, he said, Dean, you just need to get out there and do more readings. You need to get comfortable within your own skin, as it were. You need to figure out how the universe works with you, and and how to interpret the messages, the things that you're getting, and everything, and how to formulate those into words, what you're seeing, sensing, feeling, all that. And he said, you're great at what you do. He said, you just need to hone the craft. And it's like anything else, like a drummer in a band. They get better by playing and playing again and playing again and playing again. And so quite honestly, Wilda, for a year, that's what it was Dean the Soldier by day and Dean the Medium by night. It sounds like a new Marvel comic, right? So if anybody's out there, a comic book creator, let me know. But quite honestly, it was trying to juggle everything family, everything metaphysical. And then, oh, by the way, I'm still very much a full-time soldier. And I was in the, what we call the short count, so to speak, of retirement. I was, by that time, I was in my last year. And so, I did all this, readings after readings, and I wasn't charging for it. And it was interesting because it started very close-knit with family and friends and very low-key. And then all of a sudden I started getting calls, and I was like, who is this? And now you would expect, hey, this is about your car's extended warranty. But back then it was more, hey, you don't know me, but I'm a friend of a friend of a friend. And I heard that you're doing readings. I would really love to get one of your readings. And so I quickly learned that I need to get an appointment book so I could be my own secretary and trying to juggle all my schedules. And so quite honestly, that's kind of where it started, and then it trickled from there. And
Well, it's interesting because if you suddenly realize, oh, I've got a real gift, and I'd really like to
Right.
musical gift, and I'd really like to learn to play the clarinet. Well, there's endless number of places you can learn to
Yes.
clarinet,
Right.
but when you're looking at esoteric things like this, it's like,
Right.
most people are self-taught because the skills and the checks and the balances haven't been handed down from generation to generation like they used to be.
That is
So
correct.
it's a real wrestling match, isn't it?
There's a big learning curve for sure.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I would
We're
also,
just about out of time in this
okay.
segment, Dean. But on the other side, I would like to get into what's that learning
Yeah.
curve look like? How can people tell if they're maybe psychic and haven't figured it out yet? So Dean and I will be right back to continue our discussion. Please stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org, and we're coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. Just because they're dead doesn't mean they're smart. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing reliable sources from the other side is Dean McMURRAY. His website, themilitarymedium.com. Dean, before we went into the commercial break, we were talking about, what does it take? Where can you find the training to be able to start to discern? Are you talking to somebody reliable or are you not? In your experience, are there disembodied spirits that haven't crossed over, that haven't dropped their robes, in other words, and reached a higher plane, that they're dead, but they're just exactly like they were before they crossed, and they may or may not have anybody's best interest at heart? Have you run into that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I would answer your first part of your question about, finding a teacher is it can be very hard if you don't travel in those circles like where I was originally. I didn't know anybody other than, this quote unquote voodoo chick. And disclaimer, she doesn't do voodoo. She was just a local psychic. But, one door leads to another. And if you have a local metaphysical shop or rock shop, something like that, a hub of information, or obviously let Google do the search for you, right? I think where a lot of people go to nowadays. But ultimately, what I would say to Wilda is ask. There's so many forums out there anymore in your local area. If you're brave enough to ask in an open forum, say, who do you guys recommend? Use word of mouth and trust your intuition when it comes to that as far as teachers, because everybody and their brother now is a teacher, and that they teach something. I probably am not the person to teach underwater basket weaving, but I'm sure there's somebody out there that does it. But going back to the question about, have I experienced what we would consider earthbound souls, people that have not crossed over, as you put it, haven't dropped their robes yet. I love that analogy. And the aspect of, may not having our best interest at heart. Yes. So, in the aspect of spirits and energy, there is the positive and then there is the negative of all things. And when you're dealing with positive, you're going to end up eventually dealing with something negative in nature. And when I say negative, a lot of people, I really refrain from using the words of evil or, but those things do exist out there. Whatever label you may want to give them, I just give it a general umbrella term of negative energy. But the thing that I would share is, yes, I have, doing dowsings and clearings for clients over the years. And then obviously even just doing readings, sometimes people from all backgrounds deal with a lot of different stuff. And, if they're dealing with something that isn't so nice, or maybe they have somebody within their life, or whatever the case is, or maybe dabbling in something they shouldn't have, that all of a sudden now they get themselves in the proverbial pickle. Now it's like, oh, now I have a attachment or possession or whatever the case is yes, I have had experiences with those souls that have not crossed over. Now, I would say is that, in reality, I would say that less than 1% rule comes up in the nasty category. And I would say the 99.9% of most, whether earthbound souls or souls that are, dealing with are, I would call them Joe Schmo souls, right? I don't want to say just so nonchalant, but a lack of better words, it's, where you just the everyday individual that's on the other side that is trying to get from point A to point B.
Well, it would make sense that if they're earthbound souls, but they've been people, they'll have the good, the bad. They'll have something that they believe in that isn't necessarily true, et cetera, et cetera. But when you're working with someone that is absolutely coming back from the other side to aid, as in the case probably of your grandmother, how can you tell the difference between somebody that hasn't crossed and somebody that's coming back to help?
Right. Well, first and foremost, I would always say is to get very clear on what, the vibration of things. And what I mean by that is typically the way that I denote either living people or deceased individuals or entities is by how they vibrate to me. Negative energy to me feels kind of like, you think of like a syrup, kind of sticky and heavy and slow, like, maybe trying to pour oil out in the middle of February, right? And to me, a divine or somebody with positive intentions is very light and very fluttery in a sense of, and I kind of always envision like a butterfly, if you think of it.
So you're kind of kinesthetic. In other words,
yeah, kinesthetic, trying to how it feels. I'm very much the feeler, and that's how I usually feel. And then, but I would also share is, if you're doing this kind of work, number one, you should be protecting yourself. And number two,
tell us how to do that.
So, right. Well, we could do a whole show on that. But what I would share is, down and dirty is number one, connect with your spirit guides. And if you connect to archangels, you can do that. I work a lot with archangels as well. And you can ask for divine blessings and protection. You can envision a beautiful bubble around you. Think of psychic self-protection if you want to look that up and how to do that. Prayer, intention. Some people love to have crystals, they do chants, they do a lot of different things. You can also do like cleansing baths, different to cleanse your aura, your inner being, anything that raises your vibration and puts you in a good place energetically will always be top tier, right? So, and that's why if you read older literature, it'll always say, make sure you drink plenty of water, eat, best meals that you can, exercise. Now I sound like somebody trying to give you a self-help thing, but it's the same regardless of whether you're a Olympic athlete or whether you're doing metaphysics. You're using a tremendous amount of energy.
Well,
And
you're
you
also
need
the tool, right? And the
what?
window,
Absolutely,
the light is only as clear as the window through which it shines. So if you're all
absolutely. Well
bogged
said.
down with chemicals and this and that, you're just not going to be as clear of a channel, are you?
No, you hit the nail on the head. And Wilda, is that and that the other thing I would share is people that consume substances such as drugs or excessive alcohol, and then it's just like drinking and driving. You don't want to start connecting to spirits and then be under the influence of different things, because you're lowering your energy. And so
And who are you going to meet there, right?
right, and next thing you know, then now you need help, or you get sick. And so you got to be very cautious. And this takes a tremendous amount of personal energy to connect and maintain the connection of connecting to the other side. And a lot of times, some days just having a simple cold can give you the proverbial flat tire and the whole thing, because you just feel wiped out. And it's like, oh my goodness, I just feel like somebody knocked me right in the face.
Right, you get sick, your frequency drops, and you're not connecting like you used to. So you were talking about working with your helping spirits, and archangels are a good one. They're aren't they metaphor for a particular divination of power of frequency? And if you attune to them, then that takes you to that place in frequency. How do you find those? And again, how do you tell if you're working with an authentic or a charlatan?
Well, great question, because that actually happened to me. And there was a story of where I was asked to come in to cleanse a place. And when I did my cleansing, I always work with my archangels, and I had them come to do the cleansing. At the end, I said, guys, is there anything else? And I got, nope. And there was plenty more to do, but whatever was, or the entity that didn't want me there was like, no, just go away. And so that question is, again, you need to understand how you understand the difference between positive and negative energy. And it's not just as easy as Dean McMURRAY telling everybody this is the way, because there is no one way. There's many ways, and everybody will interpret energies and spirits differently.
Well,
And
isn't that the thing with these kind of gifts? It's not like you've picked up a camera and you have to learn how to use the camera.
right.
It's your facility is the tool. And
Yes.
everybody's facility is different.
Yes.
So
Just like
that
your
be-
fingerprint. Yes.
yeah, that being the case, isn't there a certain amount of emotional and mental work you have to do as well to know that you're clear and
Yeah.
on the channel?
Yeah. One day you might be dealing with your own past life stuff that is bringing up all this emotional, like you don't even know why you're grieving, and or just a lot of things. It just brings up, things that you didn't even know that you were going to be like, really, did I sign up for this? Did I really?
Did I really? Well, Dean,
It's like,
it's
I'm going to have a
again,
talk with myself. Um,
it's Dean again. It's time for another station break.
sure.
But please stay with us. Dean and I
will.
will continue to explore messages from the other side. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org, and we're coming to you on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. What's the difference between a good psychic medium and a quack? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with Dean McMurray. His website, themilitary.medium.com. Dean, I'm going to leave you with that question. How do you tell the difference between, because sometimes somebody
Yeah.
can have a little bit of a gift and they hang out their shingle
Mhm.
and, maybe they only get one little glimpse, but it's accurate and they've got the person hooked. Okay. Yeah. And so from that moment on, they take whatever that medium is saying as gospel, even though they might be pulling it out of there someplace. Okay. How can you tell when you're dealing with a good medium and somebody that's a medium?
Medium. So that's a great question. Well, first and foremost, I will always be the proponent and will always, my first recommendation will always be trust your intuition. What does your intuition say? Not your emotional, like, oh my God, I'm hooked on what this medium is saying, but what is your intuition telling you? First off. Secondly, do they have any, what is the word of mouth? Does this person have any credibility? Have they been on any programs, or have they, what is the local feedback? What's the reviews look like? What are the bad ones saying? I have some bad ones. Not everybody, even Steve Jobs had critics. So, I mean, even the great people out there is not 100% every time. And the other aspect is, are they being very upfront and honest with you? In my opinion, is that a medium should be empowering people. They should, they should make it okay to turn their away clients if they feel that they're not a match, in a meaning intuitively they know that they're not supposed to give them a reading, instead of, oh my God, I need this client, saying, I don't feel that I'm supposed to be giving you a reading today. Would you like me to recommend a medium to you? Or would you like to go and find, but I'm not supposed to give you a reading today. So to be okay with turning people away, also recommending other people, but empowering at the end of the day, supporting and empowering the client. But I will share with this is, a medium is a medium is a medium, meaning we all do the same thing, but we all do it differently. So if a person comes to a medium thinking in their mind that the message is going to be XYZ, they're doing themselves a disservice. But I would also share is there is also a requirement of the medium to give them some evidential information instead of going, you are on the right path. It's like, oh, okay, well, we can all get that. Okay, thanks, Buddha. But what I'm saying is that there has to be some evidential information. And so where people, connect with, and they can go, yes, that is, and understand that there is the aspect of, and just like when I meet with clients, understand that sometimes they can't validate at that point, but understanding that, hey, I trust also in the process of, they may have to validate later going, oh my God, grandma did grow corn and I don't know, play cribbage, or whatever, was shown. So maybe they have to go back and ask mom or dad or their aunt or uncle.
Well, it seems like in mediumship, just like in psychotherapy or anything else, you're dealing with you're getting in deep to people. You're dealing with their emotions. You're dealing with their way they think, and this information doesn't necessarily line up with the way we're thinking in the moment. Okay, so what we see in ordinary reality, non-ordinary reality, is much more expansive and kind of hard to understand. Do you find that a lot of times you're having to interpret? And if so, how can you be sure you're giving the right interpretation?
Yeah, well, that that's a great question, because a lot of it is sometimes, as you shared, Wilda, is the universe will work with everybody uniquely, right? Because if you're more of a feeler, the medium will get more of a feeling, but the universe is trusting, saying, hey, dummy, we're giving you this information so you can put that into words and describe, hopefully accurately, what we're giving you, right? You know, the smell of grandma's homemade pie or whatever it is, right? Or the feel of her homemade quilts. But the thing that I would share is that there is an aspect of trusting that you not only will get it right, but also in the aspect of being big enough person that sometimes you will interpret it incorrectly. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but in a lot of my courses, when I do a course on mediumship, so many mediums stop their development because they're so worried about getting it wrong. And when we remove that equation, we make it okay to just take out the filter, so to speak. I always use the analogy of a lawnmower and removing the muffler, removing the air filter. And that also means more information is coming at you because you're not filtering the information. You're not going, oh, did I get that right? Is that because Gwilda, is that because she's wearing those beautiful earrings? Is that because, whatever the case? And so we're up in our brain, not in our intuitive heart, going, this is what I'm seeing, and just giving it, and, and through. Not thinking.
Right.
We're just coming from spirit.
So, Dean, it's the time in the program when I get to ask you, what's your mission?
My mission is to help others heal one communication at a time.
Hey, short, sweet, and very powerful. So let's talk about permission. Again, we're deep into people's business when we're doing something like what you're doing. And sometimes you'll be getting information possibly that from somebody that didn't necessarily come to you. How do you work with that? How do you work with permission? Where do you stand on it?
So you mean as far as being in a supermarket or something like that, and then all of a sudden somebody's grandmother, is that the scenario that you're...
Well, that's one of them, but the other one could be that you're working for somebody, but then also you're given information about their sister, say for instance.
Oh.
Okay. So but you don't have the sister's permission because she's not in front of you. She didn't come to see you.
I have very strong boundaries, and I think number one, that it's kind of the way that I was raised, but number two, it was also the way that I was raised in understanding metaphysics, because it coincides with my ethics. It's if in the scenario, if I was we'll just say we're giving you a reading, Gwilda, and all of a sudden I get information about, say, your living sister, and say your deceased grandmother, somebody says something about her, I can share that because I'm getting that. But if I get anything, oh my God, because then all of a sudden I've crossed a boundary and I'm starting to read your sister. And so then what I do is, if it's not just a general, hey, make sure to let your sister know, grandma says hi. If it's something beyond that, typically what I will always do is I go back to spirit and go, look, if you want me to connect with her sister, then that's on you. I want you to have a dialogue with her inner self or something, so she can reach out to me or somebody else and to get a reading, because that's a boundary deal. Spirit's just going to start spitting stuff out, but here, on the earth plane, we set those boundaries. And sometimes I have got stuff. Sometimes I've gotten stuff about, as sad as this report, abuse, stuff about whether it comes to drugs or, there's no limit to what the information I get. And I have to use my ethics, my bedside manner, and you have to juggle it and go, that's a boundary concern. And a lot of times there has been, especially in a public gallery, where I'll be giving somebody a reading and it's almost physically like a drape that gets closed. And I'm like, wait a minute. And it's because it's getting too sensitive for the forum that we're in. It's like, we're not sharing any more information, because They got a lot of stuff going on, and now is not the time to share that in front of everybody. It's hard enough, talking about, oh my God, when watching their grandma pass and on hospice or whatever the case was.
Right, right.
So it's really kind of up to the individual, but spirit also has a hand in it as well. But if you don't have boundaries,
doesn't your intention have a hand in it too? Don't you just say,
absolutely,
I only want to see what's in this person's best interest to be told at this
yes.
time, and then that pretty much puts up the screens, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'd use an analogy because I teach this also in my classes, Gwilda, is when I was in the Army, when I was in combat arms, we would always talk about what's in people's hands, right? And just like this pen is, I could do a lot of things with the pen. I could harm somebody with the pen, or I could write you a really nice note. And it comes down to intention.
Yeah,
What is
absolutely.
your intention?
Yeah. Well, Dean, on that note, unfortunately, we could go on for a couple more hours. I'd be
Absolutely.
perfectly happy, but we are out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
My
Appreciate it.
pleasure. Our guest this hour has been Dean McMURRAY, the military medium. Dean is an internationally acclaimed psychic, medium, healer, dowser, and ordained minister. To find out more about Dean and all he has to offer, visit his website, themilitarymedium.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy our past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us right here next time. This mission will continue, bringing information, resources, and support to an evolving world.